Everybody, thank you all. Oh, hello to those online. Hopefully you can hear us okay. Welcome. We are delighted to be nearing hopefully some of the end of our long process. I would like to call to order, and if you want, Carolyn, if you could go through roll call, please.
Absolutely.
Unless you've already done. Well, go ahead. Just
So we do have a quorum. So here in the in person, we do have Lieutenant Governor Hull, Representative Bombach, Wayne Emsley, Commissioner Navarro, David Price, Representative Ramon, Jeff Tashner, and Bill Oberly. And then logging in virtually, we have Secretary Geisenberger, Senator Pettyjohn, and Michael Bagato. Am I missing anyone?
And I know Senator Townsend's coming on. Yeah, pinged me, he's joining soon. All right, so with that, can we kindly have approval of minutes from September the 8th, if I have a motion and second?
Motion to bring it up. Yep.
Motion, second, and any discussion?
On the adjournment,
Yes.
I think we probably should, and there's only one sentence, and delete the words "the public session."
Okay. All right. Anyone else online? Any comments on our minutes? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No nays or abstentions. So the minutes are hereby approved. And I don't know, was that Senator Townsend? Was that your voice I heard? Oh, thought I heard Senator Townsend up there. Who knows? All right. It's bad when you think you're hearing Senator Townsend's voice in your ears. How about that? We spend too much time, I guess, together in some places. All right. Next, let's go right into the rest of the agenda. And what I want to start out with, and I had spoken briefly yesterday with my co-chair and text with my other co-chair, that we are approaching, thank goodness, a report, and we're really excited. And there's a couple strategy that we can approach to do this. You know, we can dive directly in to the actual overall report, or we can be a little more focused and start in the pages that are going to be going to the SEBC for consideration, because in our dialogue, we were hopeful to perhaps provide like an abbreviated or supplemental report should we not get everything done today, because the goal is to ensure that Secretary Cade, Secretary DeMatteis, and all the members, myself, Trinidad, of the SEBC, that they have the report in hand. And again, it may be the abbreviated report or the overall. And so I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, I think that when I saw the depth and breadth of the report, and thank you, Kristen, there you are, for that. And then as we started gathering input from both subcommittee members and the public, it became apparent to me that this is a very big task, and I wasn't convinced that it's something that we could even complete in a 2.5-hour meeting today. And I'd like to get more accomplishments before we do something similar to a status report of this depth. Clearly, it's clear to me that we need to get a report to the SEBC. And it's in that spirit that I also offered an alternative, what's the term? Whatever that abbreviated report to the SEBC that was put online yesterday, that just has what the motions were as it relates to the upcoming request for proposal from the SEBC. Again, the quality of the feedback is really appreciated and is thorough. And if the subcommittee wishes, we can absolutely dig in deep to the full draft report, or we can consider the abbreviated. To me, it's the role of the subcommittee.
So I don't know if you all want to. I mean, the professor would like, hey, let's get it all done and just get started page 1 and work our way through. But I think as you all have put a lot of energy and time, as has the public, to make sure we have information to the group, we could just dive right into those pages. So is there a preference, anyone online, or? Yes.
I move that we review this abbreviated report And I in fact would say that we should accept it as is. Do that first, and then if there's time, looking at what else you want to do, then dive into the larger report. But I think we ought to deal with
That's a
this
motion
first
then?
because it is a motion.
A motion, do I have a second? And we'll have a
Second.
discussion. Motion is here in a second, that we look at the abbreviated, report that we can give, and it's not super long, to the, SEBC, and if there are thoughts or comments, let's have them now in discussion. Does everyone online have that before you? It says abbreviated report, those online who are voting committee members. So Secretary
Do we-
Kate, I hope,
do we-
hopefully you have it.
Do we have it in any form other than what's up on the screen right now?
It was
We
in
can
an email.
We can email, it should be in the email. Secretary Geisenberger, I'm so sorry, I didn't know you were there too, sir, apologize.
It should have been emailed to you yesterday afternoon, and it is on the website of
Yep.
materials for
Yes.
this.
Hey,
And
Rick,
speaking of which, we
Rick, I
made
just
sure-
sent it over to you, Rick, just so it's at the top of your inbox.
Thank you.
What a good assistant you are, Senator Khadija.
I have about 5 emails from Carol and Mick, so.
Okay.
not sure.
All right, she's one of your favorite people, like mine. Okay, well, with that, then we have before us, let me get the right report. Where did it go? In front of us, the abbreviated report. And again, if you all want to take a quick look over, I'll give you a minute or two to read that.
But if I may.
Yes.
I went out of my way to have no editorialize it, and just facts, keep it pretty darn skinny. And hopefully nothing controversial is in here. And very laser focused for next Monday's meeting of the SEBC as they consider the request for proposal for the next health plan for Medicare age retirees. I did on the second page include the website where all the material from all of our work over the past 6 months, 7 months
Seven.
is on. Yes, painfully 7. So
Thank you.
anyway, but when I looked at the great and long report, draft report, plus the great and lengthy comments, I said, well, let's have a shorter option here. So that was what went into it.
Okay, we'll let everybody read. For those who don't have it, we'll leave the screen up there, and if you need to come sit closer to read it, you can. If not, it's what you all heard us read last month and what we voted on. We have it?
So can I ask what there's 9 attachments or 10 attachments to this email. Which one is it?
Does it say abbreviated
Oh,
report?
I see, abbreviated. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, now I got it. Thank you. Just give me.
All right, we'll give you a
For what it's
couple minutes.
Abbreviated is the third label we used for this.
Yes.
It took us a while to get.
We're not
to
gonna share
abbreviated.
the first one. Just leave it in your head. You'll have to be, that'll be the question of the day. What was the first label? It didn't work. Sorry.
No problem.
Oh my God. Time is you. Okay, look at this.
Oh, yes. Faith points out on line 3, it should say abbreviated rather than special report. Thank you, Faith.
Did Senator Townsend get in? He's having an issue getting in. You know, Kristen, you may have to text him the link.
Don't see him.
He's right.
Don't have his phone number.
She'll get it. All right. Anything editorializing, any content, any questions? Yes. Go ahead.
Thing, Paul, further down, third paragraph, it says special report. So I think what we just want to say, anywhere it says special, we wanted to change to abbreviated.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
That was the second title.
Phil doesn't tell us.
You don't want to know the.
Double secret. No, that wasn't it.
So I do have a question,
Go ahead.
which is, I think this covers perhaps everything that's been voted on in a session with with the exception of the 80%? Was there a reason that recommendation is not in here?
The 80%, thank you, Mr. Secretary. 80% doesn't apply to the contents of the request for proposal, as we understand it, not that it's been provided to me. This also does not include the motion having to do with the recommendation of 1% of the budget. So things outside the RFP, motions that we've taken outside the RFP are, at least it's intended, are uniformly and consistently not included here.
Would you mind drafting something that makes it clear that this does not include all of the motions?
Yes.
I think the second sentence says that. Particularly those that relate to the RFP. This is to inform the SEBC of relevant work and recommendations made by the RHBAS, particularly those that relate to the RFP to be approved by the SEBC at its upcoming meeting. So that
Okay.
second sentence in bold is intended for that purpose, Mr.
But-
Secretary.
But I'm wondering.
I'm wondering if you could just say something that, you know,
Yes.
this does not include a record of every motion adopted by this.
And, well, thank you. Let me also add the second bolded
We can do
section later in the page also says that has approved by motion the following actions, recommendations, both regarding retiree health benefits and relating to the RFP. So we can add in there, thus there are additional actions and recommendations made that are not included here. That's what
Yeah,
you would
something,
prefer?
something to that effect. So
You could do it there at the top. You could just do a cross-reference. Just say, you know, you could say,
There are additional
Yeah.
actions and recommendations that the RHBAS has taken that do not directly relate to the RFP and therefore are not included in this
Yeah.
report.
Carol, you got that?
I might take the first couple, just say actions and, you
Right.
know, there are, just say actions and that were.
Perfect.
And for
Carol,
placement,
did
you
you
may
get it?
want to put that in the paragraph right before your subcommittee membership, because you
Yeah.
somewhat
yes.
address it there.
That's what I think too.
Saying
I was
that
thinking there, because you also have the
A
link.
report of
So
additional
Carol,
recommendations.
before the subcommittee member, so do you want to read what you have? Or do you want somebody to read it back to you?
Perfect, that would be perfect.
Who wants to read it back?
So actions and recommendations taken
Okay,
by,
wait a minute. They would be doing this, if everybody concurs. I mean, we could do it in a number of places. You could do it.
but after the website perhaps,
Mhm.
actions and recommendations taken by the
Wait.
RHBAS that are not directly related to the imminent decision on the RFP are not included in this report, but are included in the minutes of the meetings listed on the website above.
I lost you after
No
a
problem.
minute. I'm
Where
sorry.
were you at?
Not directly related to the imminent,
RFP are not listed in this report, comma, but can be found in the minutes of the meetings which are posted on the website above.
Got it.
Is that good?
Yep, got it.
Mr. Secretary, is that good?
I'm sorry, can you restate that? Because there's one other
Yes,
thing.
we're gonna have Carol read it.
Yes, so it's gonna be just below the website that's listed on the abbreviated report. It's gonna say actions and recommendations taken by the rebus that are not directly related to the imminent RFP are not listed in this report, but can be found in the minutes of the meetings which are posted on the website above.
Okay, so the other thing I wanted to ask is if in that same paragraph, which I think is just before subcommittee membership, if you could say the RHBS will continue to meet regularly with the goal of issuing a report of additional recommendations. All public information, including the votes on the above motions, is maintained at this site. Because
Is there-
I want to be clear that, you know, I think this report accurately reflects what we've done, but I don't want my vote for it to be taken as my vote for the 5 recommendations. Because I did not vote for the 5. Some of those 5 recommendations I did not vote for. So I wanted
Right.
to be clear that that information is available if people want to see the vote totals.
Oh, okay. So we can condense your language down then.
Maybe in the that sentence that you have added, when it talks about the minutes, which also include the full votes on every motion taken. be found on the website above.
Something like that is fine.
Okay, that covers you, yeah.
You know, because I do think most of the committee members can vote for this report as an accurate reflection, but they may not have voted for every motion.
Got it.
I know I certainly have not.
Thank you. Got it. All right, so, everybody okay? I don't hear anything else. Yes, Representative.
Just a question, on subsection 4 on the second page. There's a recommendation that the RP utilize the 3+2. And what I believe has been presented to the SEBC at this point is a 2+1, is that correct?
That is correct.
So, I mean, I'm happy to see this in this report, because I think that's where we need to be. And certainly, I hope the SEBC takes some notice of that.
Yes. And this is a accurate reflection of the motions on the RFP taken by this body.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay. So, any other comments or questions? If not, we'll call the vote. Yeah, go ahead.
Just one jump, and I'm happy to see beyond those that serve on the committee who are members of the SEBC, to see one member of the SEBC here with us today. Unfortunately, you know, from my perspective, they all ought to be here, or they should have been here through this process. But goes to the heart of my question. On Monday, do you, Madam Chairman,
Yeah.
or the two co-chairs, do you plan on being at the SEBC meeting to provide?
We hope, yes,
for
that is our
input.
goal. That is our goal. Yep, because it
Okay.
is an agenda item. And so we have a comment out in Trinidad is there, our department, our host today. So I think between he, myself.
there.
Good.
Yep, we'll be there.
Yeah, I just want to make sure there's no misunderstanding
Nope.
of what the intent of this subcommittee is.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep,
thank you.
and then, you know, we'll be having communicated, I think, the secretaries that during that moment of presentation, that there'll be an opportunity for us to provide some succinct, you know, update.
Thank you.
That is our goal.
Thank you.
Thank you. I should have said that.
No, I'm sorry.
Read my mind. And he'll do a good job. He'll do a great job. All right. With that, gosh, quiet group. Yes. Brian. Oh, Brian. Brian needs to be elevated to vote. He's a panelist.
Trying, we're working out.
That's why you couldn't find it. There you go. I was looking under S for senator.
Senator Townsend, are you there, sir? I
Yeah, my,
think we have you.
my technical difficulties. Sorry about that.
That's fine, you're here. We are looking at our abbreviated report. They made a couple additions. I don't know if you heard. Did you hear?
I did not, but I'm, you know, as much as I would like to know details, I also want to be very mindful of everyone else's time and the flow of things. So I find myself in the position of declining more information, which I don't usually do. My apologies.
But it's pretty innocent, so I will confess for you that it's nothing to worry about that you weren't here. So having said that, I don't have any other comments, so let's take a vote on the abbreviated report that will be shared with the SEBC and the governor and legislature for the upcoming meeting discussing the RFP. All in favor, signify, I'm gonna do a voice vote on this one. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, hereby pass the motion that our abbreviated report will hereby be shared with our co-chairs at SEBC, governor, and legislature. Okay. Therefore, wow, can we make the rest of the day like this? That'd be good. All right, next then, go ahead.
So on a more thorough report, and
Yes.
to me, I think I see two questions. Clearly, we're gonna need to do a final report,
Mhm.
okay? There's a question as to whether an interim report is also called for. And is that fair?
Well, I think our biggest goal is to get a report done, get this report done. And then we need to have a dialogue with Senators Townsend, with you and others, like what more we go into future conversations. I think, maybe I misunderstood you. We are not gonna probably get everything complete today. No, we're not gonna get everything done. And if it's okay with everybody here, perhaps at the end, we will have the opportunity to get another date where we can come back and do more thorough wordsmithing, look at where we stand, and then, just decide. I would hope, it would be great if we could get the October, I would like to call it October 1. I'd like to get that report done or as close as we can, not another.
So the reason I ask this is, I think we've seen in the past week, the magnitude
Mhm.
of feedback, magnitude of
Right.
material that's here already and magnitude of additional material that's been submitted. And I think that the full subcommittee's attention to that, will require
Oh, yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
time but I think there's still a lot on our
Right.
plate that I would rather have us complete our determinations before we look to finalize a report, whether it be interim or final. Because I feel that if we take that time now or this month, then that will delay us getting to, say, the pre-65 retiree stuff.
Potentially, I mean, that is something that we could certainly have a conversation on. What I'd like to do today is maybe revisit at the end, whether we call it interim, final, or what the full group wants. So in order to get started though, on the conversation piece, I think if you all agree, is there a strong feeling? I mean, I would like to delve in to what's been submitted here, recognizing we got a lot of wonderful feedback from the community, and to Kristen's awareness, why don't you share what has happened or where you put, everybody saw their feedback? Why don't you share where that is thus far? There were some commonalities. We certainly want the subcommittee, and I think that's where the representative was going, wanted to make sure the subcommittee has time to not only see what's in front as we walk through the report, but if you can take generally more time, if there's some things you missed that perhaps the public submitted or comments from the organizations that you represent, I see Mr. Pagato on and others, if there's things that you missed, that you then are able to include. And then we need to decide, whether this is interim, the future role, and I think that is a bigger discussion too. The intent of Senate Bill, 29, was to get this a report addressing the issues and how much into more in the future. I mean, I'm not, here to express an opinion one way or another. I'm just here leading the meeting.
It would seem to me that Paul and I have had a discussion, the pre-65 issue and the post-January 1, 2025 issue are issues for future discussion. And, I don't see any need to rush those issues at this point. And I guess I'm leaning more towards you, or Lieutenant Governor, in terms of trying to get from A to B right now with, the subcommittee in the future, taking a look at those two critical issues.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right. Instead, and I think it's not gonna ignore, because we
I
recognize.
mean, we're not gonna solve the
Right.
pre-65
Right.
or the post-January 1, 2025 issue here today.
No, we're not. And I think for the report, but you raise a good point. So why don't we do this to make progress? Why don't we just go right into, if you want, into the recommendations, and, Kristen or Faith, if you want to quickly say what you've done with all the feedback too, because I do respect a number of those in the audience have shared feedback with us, which was really helpful and important. Do you want to share what you did with everything thus far?
I mean, the only thing I have done is put the feedback that's come to me in this document that I think everybody has. I didn't.
No, it wasn't up to you to integrate it because we get
Yeah.
public feedback all the time, but I just wanted the public, since this is Senate Bill 29, this was created for the public to have feedback. We wanted to make sure, as we have at every meeting, we have ensured that, the public's feedback be heard. And what I was suggesting as we go through the report, again, if anyone wants to take a look at any of the comments, Wayne, you always do a great job. Wayne sent us 2 pages already. If there are things that you feel strongly, I'm saying the subcommittee, please take a look and bring some of those feedback points to us from the public. And otherwise, I know for Faith and Kristen, they would like to really hammer down things today. It would be great to be done, but like you said, we're not gonna be done, but then get another date. So how would you suggest we start? What would you
I
like to
think,
start?
I think we have to start at the beginning of the report feedback page that Kristen has done a great job of putting together, as well as this report, by the way, Kristen. I went through this morning and laid everything together. And you're right, there is some duplication. And I didn't see any places where there's any conflict. That is, I didn't see anybody saying, well, it ought to be this way, and another group, another person saying, no, it ought to be that way. So I think it's going to be a matter of, yeah, we accept the change, or no, we keep it the same. I don't think we have to decide between two individuals' edits. The first real edit that I see is on the first page of the report feedback, and it's from Secretary Geisenberger. And
Secretary Geisenberger, can you hear? He's speaking for you. Go ahead.
he is suggesting that that the third paragraph on page on the letter, the introductory letter, that third paragraph, which starts in as reported on May 1, 2023, delete that paragraph and insert the two paragraphs at the bottom of the first page of the report feedback. Now, I don't know if you want to do these individually as a consensus, or if you want to do.
So you want to eliminate the entire paragraph?
Well, it's what Secretary Geisenberger asked to do. I'm trying to get us.
I defer to the chair and vice chairs as to how they want to handle this. These were my emails regarding things I would change in the report. Whether it's time to, whether people want to be voting on that today or not is really up to the chair and vice chairs.
Okay. All right. I mean, that's just the memo. Let's take it. You know what? Let's think about that if you want to take that out or in.
I have no problem with the replacement of that one paragraph, the other two.
Okay.
Do others have any opinions on that? So your sense is
Cut this and add that. And really, this is really sort of
an
expanding.
expansion.
Do you all understand what they're saying?
I do, but the only thing is, I think there's other actions we could take today,
Mhm.
like with the motion that's tabled, that will then dictate a change in the content of this paragraph in the letter and the report itself.
I agree with that. If we were to take that action, you'd want to add that to this paragraph for sure.
All right, why don't we?
So I think, I would look at our agenda for today and suggest number 5 is something we want to talk about to the extent we have the table motion. I know Mr. Early has a motion regarding pricing, what he's been working on with, I think, with Representative Bombach. I don't know what other actions we have to take today, but I think we should get those things out of the way first before we turn to the report itself. Because whatever we do is going to change or could change the content of the report.
Right.
If that makes sense.
All right, and as long as we don't take forever, we'll do it. How's that sound like the boss
And as
professor?
requested, so everybody's clear, between last meeting and this meeting, I did meet with Joanna.
Yeah, and I wanted you to do
and
that, so
Secretary Geisenberger.
thank you.
So there's additional information. I think you're gonna
Yes.
present that, Joanna,
Yeah.
on the whole percentage of payroll
Right.
to update everyone.
Yeah, and that is important to me, right, Dave? So I'm glad that you all met and I didn't have to go to those meetings. Thank you. Thank you for that. So if the group's okay, and if Kristen's okay, because it's gonna have to be in the report anyway, hopefully. We'll defer then and come back to you, Wayne. What we'll do is we will jump to item number 5, which is discussion of recommendations of the OPEB.
Could we do number 4?
You wanna do 4 too? Okay.
Since it's in the agenda first earlier. And this is that, are you able to bring up that one exhibit that I had that looks as follows? It's,
Is this the resolution you were bringing?
no, this is, sorry, I gotta bring my. sorry.
If you don't have it, you're gonna get kicked out.
All right, remember this,
From the 9/8 meeting, the September 8th meeting.
yes,
And that's with the non-Medicare.
and this is the one, yeah, we're looking at non-grandfathered 65 plusers, and this is those who have less than 20 years of service. And, you know, to me, and as I've presented before, I think what we as an advisory subcommittee need to be asking is, how much are we looking to have the state save, and how much are we willing to have be more on the shoulders of these non-grandfathered retirees? And with those, we can figure out, okay, then we want to get them, you know, Medicare L at a, you know, 10% more employee share, retiree share, or, you know, whatever. And, oh, we need to have Medicare G, and that'll save the state some, but if we don't know what our goals are, then we don't know what pieces to put together. If we know what our goals are, we can look at the range of pieces and solve for that unknown. That's exactly, so if you expand the crap out of that, that's a very technical term. So, you know, on what you've got is, you've got 4 populations based on number of years of service, and that's the quadrants, you know, top left, top right, lower right, left, lower right. And then in each of those, you have 3 sets of columns, 10th percentile, so 10th healthiest, 90th percentile, and then average in the middle. And then it's, what if you have both, if you pair Medigap G and Medigap L. The thing to remember is that the state currently pays roughly $5,237 per eligible retiree who has the 95%, sorry, the 5% employee share. And so the question is, you know, how much more are we looking to save for them at this point? Actually, they currently pay, you can see that's the 20 plus, right, the 47.36. So are we looking to cut that? How much are we looking to cut that? How much more are we willing to have an employee pay? And that is one where one of our exhibits today shows what if an employee pays an extra $100 a month, what the savings to the state is, and we get something like a 3.4% delta percent of the gap that's in one of our exhibits. It's the only exhibit we have today. It brings you up to 63.4 with an $11 million savings for those only new hires after, only affecting new hires after 2025, after 1/1/2025. You know, how much are we, for someone who's not grandfathered, how much are we willing to have their costs go up? And this will show you what the price points are for healthier, less healthy, etc. And also for those who don't have a whole lot of years in with the state. I'm going to say, it's not that I don't care, but I don't want to lead on my assumptions. What are people comfortable with? Because when we said we want to grandfather a certain group, we're saying, therefore we can, maybe tier is a better term. We have a second tier for people who aren't even hired yet, and therefore know that there's going to be a different provision for them. How much are we willing for a retiree into that situation to pay when they're of Medicare age per year, all out of pocket? That seems like a big policy question for this subcommittee to weigh in on.
So just to clarify, this will apply to anyone hired after 1/1/25.
Yes.
Won't apply to anybody who's currently retired or hired by the state or a public school district prior to 1/1/25.
Yes.
These data, and again, if in our report to the legislature, if they wanted to include for their knowledge or information, we certainly could include any analyses, which I think we said we would do as a supplement or somewhere, have the website link, a website link. So for Representative Ramon or others, if you go back to your caucus and they'll say, oh my gosh, you know, whatever, you would at least have a cross reference if they wanted to know the data points to see, you know, what amount, small, large, whatever small amount it might be, if it was 1/1/2015. Because I have had a few members of the legislature ask, you know, they're like, oh, we like the higher of 1/1/2025, but what's the fiscal cost? What is it? And so again, we don't have to have that. We've all agreed to do 1/1/25 for this report. But I just want to make that clear that in our supplemental materials that are online, that would be available to a member of the General Assembly still. I just,
Carol, can you expand the top left, have the far left column and then the top left quadrant in there? So a little higher, yeah, and perfect, that's perfect. So if you just look at people who have 20+ years in, this changes you from Medic Fill to Medigap G. Okay, and that is slightly less generous than we currently have with Medic Fill. And it's roughly $500 more out of pocket. It's $500 less to the state. And the employee, the covered retiree, would be paying somewhere on the order of the 50th percentile of roughly $500 more per year. L is in there really not for those who have 20+ years, but really for the other 3 age cohorts. And we have the same dollar amount. So they would pay the same whether they get Medigap L or Medigap G. The reason is we don't want to economically encourage a retiree to choose L when G is better for them. So for this retiree who has 20+ years working for the state, in a sense, we want to encourage them to get the better coverage, the G coverage. Okay, so they'll be paying less out of pocket. But once you have less than 20 years and you're paying a bunch of the premium because you don't have a lot of years in with the state, we want to give them a less expensive choice. If they, an informed retiree says, you know what, I'm so healthy that I want to pay less and I'm willing to have more risk and less coverage because of how my health I think will be in the next year. So that's the other 3 quadrants. But again, this goes on an assumption that we're comfortable having retiree pay maybe $500 more a year on average if they have 20+ years with the state. And you can say that doesn't save the state enough, or you can say that saves the state just right. You can say, whatever.
well, this is a point in time and a trajectory for years out. I mean, that's the thing. So again, I think I'm looking at the insurance commissioner. He wants to say something or he's
No, I'm
thinking.
just,
I'm looking at the thought bubble above your head.
This is gonna go up.
Right, it's gonna go up.
And so we can come up with numbers today.
That's what I'm saying, the
Exactly.
numbers are
This
gonna
is-
go
this
up.
is- These numbers are uncertain.
Right,
And what we know with certainty is that our own projections in the SEBC have been
Right.
woefully short.
Right.
So just,
I mean, I think the
Caution.
theory, I think the concept is that we appreciate the numbers. Like, I think we all recognize that it is gonna be unsustainable in the future to keep good healthcare for employees, to keep good healthcare for all retirees. If there isn't like future hires that know when they go to retirement, they're gonna have to pay for some healthcare, period. For future retirees. Again, I understand your point. Were you hoping to have this in there? Because again, I think for me, I like the concept, but I know that number is gonna be higher. That's the only thing. Dave, what are you thinking?
So can I respond quickly and
Yeah.
then defer? Indeed is gonna change. The 10% though wouldn't. So as the premium cost goes up, the 10% share of the employees go up in dollars. So it's naturally gonna go up with that.
So do you want
So
to,
that's in there already. If you think about the reason that we voted for the grandfathering for only new hires as of 2025 is, we want, when someone signs and
Right.
joins on January 2nd, for them to know what it is. So we can't just keep pushing this off. We
No.
really have to be deciding what it is we are leading them to expect when they sign on to work starting in 2025.
what ours would be a recommendation to the legislature would have to make the change, but yeah.
So in 2011, when we had the major changes, we went from 0 to 5.
Yeah.
Since, as mentioned, this is 30 years out. what we're
Right.
Talking about, so it sounds reasonable to me to go from 5 to 10.
So that could be a report, I mean, you could have a table as an exemplar with a notation that these data will change. I mean, you don't wanna be misleading. My only concern, some people look at it, maybe not fully understand, you would have to have a really good explanation, or in the narrative, say that the subcommittee has made a recommendation for consideration to the General Assembly and Governor, that they consider raising, and that would be a code change, from 5% to 10%.
And just to
for
give
new
some
hires.
historical context, because everybody listening may not
Yeah.
understand, prior to 2011, the state paid 100% of the supplemental coverage. It's part of the process that led to House Bill 81, which was triggered by then Governor Arkell's pension and healthcare protection proposal, was that employees after, I think it was dated, was July 1st, 2011 would pay 5%. of the supplement, or 2012, it was 2012, right? Because it would have been the start of the plan year, January 1, 2012. Yeah, would have paid 5%, and that's where it's at now. And any change here has to be done through the General Assembly, because this is in Delaware code. So I mean, any recommendation we make is building on where we were 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Change that was made then,
Mhm.
but again, it would require the General Assembly to make that change, right? Because this is all controlled by Delaware code.
So an order in essence of, again, time, because I know we want to get to item 5 and then get to the report, Kristen, I know does. How would you all like to proceed? Do you want to use somewhere a narrative? Some saying that in our report, I don't know, we'll find the section when we get here, that the General Assembly others consider code modification, and then Representative Bombach, do you want to come up with the
I
language?
can
real
write
quick?
up with language and
Can
bring
you
it to the
write up
next meeting.
narrative?
I mean, we had 15% proposed, thrown in an earlier illustration analysis. Before I put pen to paper, I wanted to get the sense of the subcommittee on what level they're seeking. Make it 50%, I mean,
No.
but I mean, we can do anything.
That I
which
can tell you,
I'm trying to find out where the comfort level is, on, what percent increase, and then I have illustrations to show that if you pair up G and L, you can, make, affordable price points for those who don't have 20 years of experience in there. Of course, as we've seen, 10, 50, and 90% percentiles can show you the thought process that a retiree should go through in choosing between that. So I'm introducing choice and introducing affordability for those with less than 20 years and throwing out 10% to see what subcommittee comfort level is.
So I just want to be clear, so I understand. For new hires, after 1/1/25, with 20 years of experience.
Yes.
Would then pay, instead of 5%, 10%,
They would pay 10% of the Medigap G plus prescription.
and then, thank you. And then for folks who have 15 years perhaps, who can be started later in life, would pay a higher percentage, is that what you're proposing?
What they would do is they'd be paying 50%.
50%.
Yes,
And those with 10 years,
they would be paying 70, the state would be paying 25%. Here we go. I'm sorry, for how many years?
10,
Under 15, they're paying all of it.
all of it, okay.
Yes.
Okay,
So those percent, the 50, 70, I keep forgetting whether it's retiree or state. Those percentages, I'm not illustrating as changing. Just that 20 plus year going from 5 to 10.
okay, so do we need a motion to say that we're gonna make this as a recommendation?
I think what's being asked and I'm offering is I'll come back to the next meeting
Okay.
with wording of a motion that does that, if that's what.
And if you could get it in, if we could get it in advance, and people see that in advance,
I think it's appropriate.
and it just like even in a form of a narrative, and maybe if the chart is an exemplar, we want to make sure it's clear, that we recognize these numbers are fluid and flexible and could be a goal, there could be a goal each year or something.
I mean, do also notice there is the change from a plan patterned after Medicville to a Medigap G style system, okay? I should say not a high deductible Medigap G, because there are such things, I understand it. But the standard Medigap G, and that's a change, that saves the state some. So it's both the 5% and shifting from a Medicville kind of system to a Medigap G kind of system. 2 areas of savings for the state, 2 areas of higher cost for non-grandfathered 20+ year retirees.
So you're gonna come back to that, okay, so we'll come back. So before we move to item 5, Representative Willie.
And again, I shared with Paul last Friday that, I hate to be parochial, but again, with some understanding that there's got to be some consideration of those employees that are required to retire at 20 years. And the simple fact that if they do retire at 20 years, some as young as 42, that there's a 13-year gap there.
23 year.
Yeah.
Or 23 year.
23, yeah, I'm sorry, math wasn't my strong. I appreciate that. So, with pen to paper, I would like you to address that.
I'm not planning any change to that. to what's there currently. I mean, currently,
Oh, okay. so-
right? I've no proposed change to forced retirees in 20 years are still gonna be going from 5% to 10%, nothing different.
Right.
In what I'm talking about here.
Okay,
This
so
is
the
the
eligibility.
Medicare.
You're
All
right,
right,
so
one
for
at a
Medicaid,
time.
you're
You
right,
guys
so
are
the
fun
Medicare-
now. You're coming alive.
Eligibility-
Woo!
Eligibility is not,
I'm not touching eligibility at this
gotcha,
point.
okay.
All right, and I think,
Redundancy has its place.
Dave, you have something? You sure, Wayne?
I think we need to have a motion of his proposal.
No, he's gonna come
I'm gonna
back.
bring a motion to the next meeting.
Something that we can actually
Yes.
read and see
Okay.
and
Digest it.
understand.
I think he's just asking if would like to see that,
Oh,
and I would.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's
Great.
there's consensus. Is anybody objecting to that? No. Okay. All right, nobody's objecting. All right, so something I know I've been waiting for weeks and weeks and weeks, we've been working on and y'all spared me the last meeting. Number 5, which is the OPEB funding eligibility.
So I'm
And
gonna
yes,
suggest that we let Joanna, if she's willing to do this.
she's been with us so
walk
much.
through, the work that we've done since the
Yes.
last meeting with her, it was David, myself, and Secretary Geisenberger.
Yes.
After she does that, I don't know if you want her to answer any questions,
Right.
and at that time, I'll propose to, with my motion from the table.
Right, and that'd be good. And again, for those who've been coming to all the meetings, you know, we've been talking about the 3-legged chair, the design plan, we spent a ton of time on. Little on eligibility, but then the funding, thanks to the legislature, we had the 1%. And the concept, I know when Dave and I talked months ago with Joanna about thinking of a consideration that might be an additional option. Certainly, the legislature or governor may choose not, because certainly there are always budgetary implications. But I think it's important that we at least have data and information that we can share when we put a report. So with that, Joanna, and again, it's the OPEB with the OEC.
I don't know if that, they'll be able to read it, but it'll be available. So what I'll present today is, it's 2 pages. It's what we're referring to as the OEC incremental comparison chart. So what that means is a percentage of payroll, which today is 0.36% of payroll, is the state is contributing on OPEB's behalf or on our future benefits behalf into the OPEB fund to pre-fund the OPEB. So right now, again, that's 0.36% of payroll. So the question has come about multiple times, what if we incrementally increase that amount? So the one thing that I want to make very clear before we get into the detail is this chart, you know, we've been doing this over a period of time now. So this chart, we started all of our comparisons, starting with fiscal year 2023 and what the expected budget was at that time. So some of this if you go back and look at it as far as accuracy, 23 and 24 are not going to be accurate. So we know that, but in order to keep the comparison the same from the beginning to the end, and that way we can really compare apples to apples, that's why this is the case. So what you have before you is a chart with a 30-year projection of where our budget started, and then there's an assumption that the budget's going to grow 3.6% annually. And I believe Margaret is also on the phone. So Margaret, if I say something incorrectly, please feel free to correct me. So you can see over that 30-year period, the budget increases from 4.7 billion to 14.2 billion. And again, we know that it's not 100% accurate because we've had a more recent higher budgetary growth, but that's okay. These are projections. And then taking 1% of that expected budget, we are identifying what the carve out would be. So that's an additional 51 billion, we're looking at 2024, assuming a $5.1 billion budget, additional or 51 million would be contributed to OPEB. So what is the actual trust deposit? In this chart, trust deposit is the 1% carve out plus the current 0.36% of payroll. So those two combined, that's how much we're contributing to OPEB currently. And then when you add that to the pay-go cost, so again, pay-go is the current cost of healthcare for our retirees, that equals the state's total contribution. So just again, looking at, we'll say, looking at 2024 to be consistent. 51 million was the one time, the 1% plus the 0.36% payroll totaled a trust deposit of 63.6 million. In addition to the annual cost of retiree healthcare of 272.5 million equals the state's total contribution of $336 million. Okay, so that's great. We all know, and we've proven that through our various models, that the more we contribute to OPEB helps us, right? We know funding, single-handedly funding has the largest impacts. However, if you're increasing your OEC rate, we need to really make sure that we're understanding and capturing what that means. So sticking with 2024, you know, again, based on projections, it's 0.36%, but with incremental increases the following year, so 2025 would go to 0.5%, 2026 would go to 0.75%, 2027 would be 1% of payroll. So what is that total impact of the budget? What's that percentage of the budget? So that's what's shown in the next column. And in taking it forward, what does that do to the OPEB liabilities? What does it do to the assets? What does it do to the unfunded liability? So what we should see here with additional funding, you'll see that the OPEB liability over time will continue to increase because the OPEB liability doesn't have anything to do with the funding. So just by the nature of healthcare costs going up, the OPEB liability is going to increase over time. As we contribute more, we'll see that OPEB assets increase. And again, hopefully there's compounding earnings on that. And then we'll see the OPEB liability, unfunded liability decrease because there are more assets in the OPEB fund. And then lastly, you see the funding status. So again, that would increase over time as well as the OPEB liability is decreasing. So just looking at a 0.25% incremental increase, the fund would start, we would no longer need the 1% carve out beginning in fiscal year 2046. And that's because at that point in time, we'll start paying for benefits out of the OPEB trust. And then that in turn decreases the state's contribution. So you can see a large step down of like 400 million in that particular year. And we've maxed out at 5.5% of payroll the year prior. So which we'll see the 0.25 compared to the 0.5%, that may be a little bit more easier to plan for from a budgetary perspective. But after 30 years, again, these are projections, so we know costs are gonna go up, the market's gonna go up and down, et cetera. We're looking at roughly just shy of a 76% funded status after 30 years, based on these projections.
Alone.
Alone.
Now, if you kind in design and eligibility.
So the other thing I want to take note before we look at the same chart in the half a year percent increments, the one thing I think that's important to notate is the pay-go cost. Does it change whether we're contributing a 0.25%, a 0.5%, or even a whole percent? The pay-go cost is the pay-go cost of healthcare.
Right, and so again, for budgetary things, for legislators, there would be like choices and things, we know that, but there's always choices.
Can I ask you a
Yeah.
couple questions? The first question is, I understand 3.6 growth, right? Is that growth of just a cost? That's assuming staff quantitative usage stays the same, or is that also in
That's just the gross budget.
just the budget? So
Revenue.
I understand, so that if there was another whole department added, or if we needed more people, whatever, that's a whole unexpected consideration.
Absolutely.
Or if it decreased for any reason, that's a whole, and the second is, I was just curious, if we're going for 2.5% increase, incremental increases, not that I agree with this or disagree with it, I was just asking for clarity. Why are we starting at 0.5? Why wouldn't that start at 0.86? if it's starting at the 0.5% up, I'm just.
That was just the recommendation.
That was the number we asked. We asked
We did that.
for,
Okay.
well, when Dave and I first started, we had done 0.5. Well, we started with 1, which was a little draconian, but we started there. And then we went to 0.5 and now we went to 0.25.
So in other words, we're going 0.36, we're rebooting at 0.5 as a starting point and going from there, so I
Yeah.
assume the other side's rebooting at a 1%, or no, that's rebooting at a 0.5 also.
Yeah, you also,
Got it, okay. All right.
Representative, our Senator, oh my God, Secretary Geisenberger.
I-
You gotta
we also
retire
need-
today.
we also need to recognize it was a pretty big leap to add that 1% to the OPEB trust fund, which is really the equivalent it's something like 2.3% of payroll. When we add that 1% of budget is like the equivalent of going to 2.3% of payroll. So it's already been a big jump. So this is the idea that you just keep incrementally, adding to it until you reach that point where you're fully funding the liability. Obviously the challenge is that column that says percent of budget, which goes back to an earlier slide that we had shown, which is, unless you do design and eligibility changes, you're going to consume a larger portion of the budget by trying to, when you get serious about trying to fix this problem.
I was just getting clarity, that makes sense, I was just.
So we're just doing that. Okay, so Joanna, I think you wanted to go to the next slide.
Okay, so looking at the second chart, again, it's the same chart, just with revised values based on 0.5 incremental increases. So the key here is that in fiscal year 2042, we will no longer need the additional 1% of budget because we'll start taking assets from the trust. The challenge here with that 0.5% increase is that up in through 2042, the percent of payroll goes up to 8.5%. Whereas if we do the 0.25% increments, we're at, I think, 5.5%. So it is a larger chunk of the budget overall to do the 0.5 incremental. And then after 30 years, we're looking at just shy of 78% of a funded status.
Right, so not that much
Right, it's
difference,
not
and it's still the same pay
significant.
go.
Yeah, it's
Still
not a
the same pay
significant
go.
difference for.
But it makes a huge difference then 30 years from now, whoever is sitting in these.
As a annoying math person.
You said it.
I did, I absolutely, I have to own that. It seems like, it's like a NASA rocket. It takes off really slowly, but it just keeps accelerating, right? So you've got this thing that's, and I'm looking at 0.25%, it's going up at a steady 0.25% per year. And from a legislator and the governor working on a budget, I can see that really good. Having it go to zero, I love it going to zero, but I think I'd rather see it phase down. So instead of it going up to 5.5, maybe it goes up to 4.5 and then starts dropping by a 0.25 point, so that when it goes to zero, it's from a near zero point. So instead of just keep going up and going to zero, going up and then starting to come down at a way that works. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure. I'll ask Margaret if she wants to add anything to that, but my thought of that is, this is the minimum.
Yeah.
And the state always has the ability to add
change
more than
more.
the minimum.
Because years ago, we were higher.
Okay, yes, but when a legislator looks at, you won 10% of the budget for this, we're currently paying 6.4%. That's gonna be a harder sell than if it goes up and then starts weaning off at the end, and the high point is less than 5.5%. So that's an
Right.
easier sell, which is something that we will be doing downstream of adopting any recommendation like this.
So I think the request, as I understand it, was increase the OECs until you start paying assets from the trust.
Right, I know it's an additional level of analysis, I get that completely, I'm saying it may be more palatable to the legislature and the governor if it's one that at a palatable, digestible rate increases, and then rather than keep increasing until it can be cut to zero in a single year. I think I see Representative Ramon shaking his head, having it ease down the same way rather than hit a cliff.
So doing the same math that you are doing, I'm looking at a little bit different, it's like, why would certain people have less of the liability carryover than others? You know, I was like, share the pain, so to speak. So if we only, let's just say we cap at 5% on both sides, and then we rescind the same way we went up. So in, you know, in 44, you'd come down to 4.75, 4.5, 4.25, 4.0, 4.35, and then you'd be all the way down to about 2050, and you'd be at about 3.25. And then maybe you keep a number at like 3% from then on as a steady number to keep the carrying of the assets and the expenses, because I still do believe there's going to be some modification simply because incurring more staff and other things that might subject expenses beyond the natural building we have. It's just a thought to kind of like, you know, almost like a Christmas tree coming up, but then you come back down as opposed to come up and then drop off the cliff.
I think it's important to share that the state contribution column is still there, like, that's what the state is going to pay in total. So as you can see, once you stop pre-funding by a percentage of payroll, you're now just paying the pay-go costs minus the assets that are withheld from the trust, or minus that expenses paid from the trust.
Well, then, can you help? Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean-
Can you help with like after year 2045, where we have the pay-go, right, and you have the state contribution at 1,000, and then the next year, 2046, we have 0, but it went all the way down to 632. Help me understand.
So remember, when we're paying for retiree healthcare, you've got the pre-funding, which is the percent of payroll, and that's what this represents. You also have the total cost of benefits,
I got
which
it.
is the pay-go column.
I got you. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I would add that part of this is ultimately going to be what are we pitching to the bond rating agencies? And, you know, it's to the extent that we can say, well, yeah, we may not be at the kind of 80-90% funded ratio like the pension fund that you'd like to be at, but we will have weaned ourselves over a 20-year period off of, or, you know, within the 20-year period, we'll be at the actuarially required contribution, as opposed to needing to say, well, we've got this complex thing where we go up and then we start coming down, and it might be 25 or 30 or 35 years. That becomes a much more uncertain, difficult things to explain to them, as opposed to, I mean, I certainly understand where you're coming from, but, and a lot of this would be, if we knew what the design and eligibility changes would be, might be easier to model whether that would all occur within 20 years. But without that, you know, I believe it would be helpful for, you know, with the rating agencies, whether that's sufficient for them, I can't say. I don't know if it would be or wouldn't be, but it's certainly a better story than giving them a lot of uncertainty about when it might happen.
Jeff, did you from your team want to report anything else out, or?
Well, I'm prepared to move to lift my motion from the table.
So do. If there's no comments,
Second.
motions before us, go ahead, what is it?
And let me just talk about this. One of the things I benefit from learning from all of you people over the last, how many months has it been now? 6, and even beyond that, we didn't get to where we are today with OPEB liability overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. So when this concept was introduced, it seemed really smart to me to lay out a 20 or 30-year period to address it. I listened to Paul, not because he's my representative, but I'll bring it up again. And he really, when he talked about the budget, that's what resonated with me. And we had some information that told us what the expected budget was going to be and what our contributions, but we had nothing as a percentage of budget.
Right.
So what I did last time to kind of be the catalyst was look at that, and then working with Secretary Geisenberger, David and Joanna, we've refined, and Margaret, we've refined the numbers. But I know when the SEA and the correctional officers and the troopers and ASME got together and looked at this, what made sense to us was we look at today where we're currently at 6.59% of budget. And if we undertake this action, we're going to wind up in the future where we're at a lower percentage of budget where we are today than where we are today. So where we are in the future will be a lower percentage of budget than where we are today. And in the meantime, we'll have dramatically built up the assets of the OPEB trust from 583, and I know that's 101 short because the 101 that were deposited aren't in there, to a point where we're at over 16 billion. And we'll have reduced the unfunded liability from 8.31 to, 5.1. We looked at each other and said, why wouldn't we do
Right.
this? This seems
Right.
like a very prudent, well thought out, long-term way to address the issue of the OPEB funding. And for the retirees that are here today and the people that'll come on in the future, that means that these benefits are going to be more sustainable.
Right.
And when they have to look to them today, tomorrow, in the future, we're going to be in a better position than we are now. We compared the 0.5 and the 0.25, and we settled on the 0.25 because, as Joanna said, it's
Not that
a little
much.
bit, it's a more practical approach. It doesn't, what you lose, I don't think is significant enough to say endure the additional pressure on the budget that going to 0.5 was. So that's why when we looked at this, we thought it really was very prudent. And then the other thing, I listened to Margaret and Joanna, who over the meetings have said over and over again, the only way to address OPEB funding is through funding.
Right.
And I know we all want to get to eligibility
Right.
changes and, plan design and all that, but we've seen the models. They're going to move the needle a little bit. This combined with 1% carve out is going to take us from, what were we, 6% to 75, almost 76. So, yeah. We believe Billy, Mike Pagano, myself, co-ed, I know a number of you, the lieutenant governor, the former pension administrator, the current pension administrator, if they'll let me talk for him, I think Representative Bob, like a bunch of us said, this just seems like a smart thing to do for the long-term sustainability and funding of the trust. So that's why, even though David couldn't be here, I took the ball and ran
Right.
ahead of it with him and got the motion
Thank you
out
for doing
to
that.
get things moving. So that's my comment on behalf of the motion. I don't know if
do
there
you
are
have the motion in
questions
front
or
of you?
anything.
Yeah, he does. The
Okay.
motion in second. They did.
No, can you read the motion?
The motion is in the minutes from
Very
last
good.
time.
That's fine.
Yes,
That's
and
good.
It may be the best thing for people to do because.
And then we'll do that, and then we will, I promise, I see Kristen.
It's on page 3 and 4. You can see the actual text of the motion. And I relied upon the expertise of the current and prior budget administrator
Yes.
to put this together. I didn't think of it on my own.
Yes, these are good ideas, so, and again, there will be budgetary implications certainly that the legislature would have to consider and other things, but I love having that we are giving the legislature and the governor potentially options.
Why don't we read that motion for the public? We don't have
All right, read it again. You want to read the motion that you
I'll
have?
read it from the minutes. Give me a second. I'm sure Wayne, the old school teacher, is gonna make. me
He's
do
got it
that.
already.
That's all right, that's all right.
And he's got his pen and paper
Have you
ready.
been listening?
So it's to recommend, beginning with the FY 25 budget, that continuing to contribute to OPEB pre-funding with funds generated by Senate Bill 175 and the 2 other employment costs to fund current retiree health insurance costs, in parentheses, PAYGO, and pre-fund retiree healthcare OPEB fund. In addition, increase the OPEB pre-funding to 0.5% of payroll. The pre-fund amount will then increase by an additional 0.25% of payroll each fiscal year thereafter from such funding sources that the General Assembly may determine. The total of all 3 sources of funding will not exceed the annual required contribution for the OPEB fund.
Paul, Representative?
So I do indeed support this. That said, I'm gonna offer 3 sort of sideways comments. One is, I really appreciate it being at the 0.25% per year increase versus the 0.5%. Yes, we get there fast on the half, but let's make it a little easier to operate. I note that because it's payroll and not budget, it is, some of it comes from funds other than general operating budget. And that sounds like a good thing, but there is also downside to that. And I will be the first to admit that while I voted for the increased minimum wage, some of our nonprofits really got hurt because they're often paid by contract, fixed dollar contract, and they had to raise the wage for people working where their revenues weren't going up with that. So, and with that, as an example, I believe DENREC has a lot of its payroll paid through fees, park fees and things like that, that aren't going up with this, and they'll be responsible. So it's, I wanna say it's intentionally not an unintended consequence, because I'm calling it out here, but it's gonna be an extra challenge. So it's not a freebie, that the ASF stuff, and note it has both positives and negatives in that. And I think that those were the only things I wanted to say, but again, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing. I initially looked at this as this is a last chapter we should get to once we know what we're doing, eligibility and all the other stuff. But I recognize, I think Joanne will give me some body language, head nodding, that anything we do that helps save on the front end will naturally flow through the system. And therefore, it doesn't have to be the last chapter, it can be today's chapter.
And one thing that I
Yeah.
didn't mention in your comments, triggered me, and Joanna and I have talked about this. What we're doing today is laying out a course for 30 years. We think it needs to be revisited, every 5 years?
It needs to be.
To make sure that there's no dramatic change in the assumptions and that sort of thing. So, part of what we would include in our recommendation down the road would be, we pass this, we also got to think about making sure there's a periodic revisiting and review so that things are holding and that if there are changes, whoever it is, 5, 10, 15 years down the road, can make the necessary adjustments to carry out our intent.
Representative.
We're not foolish enough to think that if we recommend this and this is implemented, it's gonna work exactly the
No.
way it is on paper. Something's
Nothing
gonna
does.
vary.
Representative Ramon?
And Madam Chair, to that point, which is what I was really gonna address, in a 5-year look back, we would have almost parameters of concern. If we're not meeting this goal, then blah, or if we're exceeding that goal, then blah. I almost, because everybody's perception in time, 5 years of different legislators and whatnot, changes things. I think that it's really important with all the work and research, we have that. And I don't even know what that is. I'm not suggesting I do, but something that says, okay, we're being more successful than we expected. We can, back off a little, or we're not doing what we thought, we need to bump up a little bit, and what that back off or bump up needs, like if then, so it doesn't become another or a political football, whatever. And Madam Chair, just checking, these are recorded, right?
Yeah.
And I'm allowed to use that little portion so that when I'm running for re-election, I can say how much Representative Bombach loved my
Yeah.
don't raise the minimum wage concept. I'm teasing, I'm only teasing.
I love
We both understand both sides. It's
I
just,
know, I know.
it was not something I could let go by, though. I needed to get.
That's
some
good. We
levity
needed
there.
a laugh. I haven't
Little
given
bit
you
of
a laugh in
levity,
a few
yeah.
minutes, but speaking of laughing, we'll get down to continued comments of business. I promise, Kristen, we're gonna get to this report. Okay, Wayne?
Yeah, just a little editorial thing, Jeff, and the sentence where in addition, the 0.25%, that's for FY 2025. The sentence
Yeah,
reads
so what we would do is,
of payroll for FY 2025.
looking at the 0.25, we would go to the 0.5 in FY 25.
Yeah.
And then we would begin the 0.25% climb in FY 26.
We just need to add for FY 2025 in the motion.
And
all
that's
I'm
eight.
saying.
It's
We
on
said
this page.
It was in the
2025, that's
believe
what
it
we said.
is.
I think it is too.
Oh, it is.
because I-
Yeah, it's in the motion. First
All right, so.
Beginning with the FY 25 budget.
To go to 0.5.
To 0.5 and then every year.
0.25.
Okay, all right,
Because that's spread across pages.
yeah. Okay. You're right.
All right,
Yeah.
let's call the question. All right, we're ready to do so. Everyone, we had the motion before us, with the.
Madam Chair,
Oh, we're all right there?
we have a
Somebody.
roll call?
Yes. Oh, Mike, yes. Did you want to say something, Mr. Bagato?
No, I just want to ask for a roll call vote.
Oh, okay, that's where we are, right where we are, calling for the roll right now. On the motion before us with the OPEB liability and the OEC for consideration to be adopted and can be included also in the report.
Move by consensus?
Yeah, let's try a voice vote. And if I have opposition, then we'll do a roll call. All in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing abstentions or no opposition, the motion hereby carries to be then so inserted and included in our report. And we'll probably need a little more of a narrative so that when people read that, because there's just no way they're gonna understand all that. And we'll have the motion in there. So, yes,
May I present an additional motion?
as long as you're quick,
I'm
quick.
it's-
I'm sensing angst over here.
So, I move that we recommend that the state provide additional one-time contributions when circumstances such as one-time revenues or surpluses permit, similar to section 116, the sheet special funds of the fiscal year 22 Bond and Capital Improvement Act under Senate Bill 200.
Second.
Second, okay, we have a motion before us for
So,
consideration.
The state has been doing this, I think maybe 5 times in the past decade. And I think it's important for our subcommittee to recommend that we continue and honor and encourage continuation and maybe even expansion whenever possible.
Do members want to vote on that today, or when he comes back with his other motion, would you like to have that before you, so you have time to read it in
Probably
advance?
to be consistent, let's do them both together. I like the motion, but I almost think there might be
Yeah,
something.
for
to
people to
add
have
to
it in advance in the public, yeah, go ahead.
I guess a technical question, would that be at the discretion of OMB and Joint Finance
It
Committee?
would,
This is be a recommendation to the General Assembly. I don't think it's gonna be a statutory, I don't picture it as a statutory.
No, but I assume it would be part of the regular.
and
budgetary
Secretary
process.
Yes.
Geisenberger, you know, his team.
And with the
would
Bond
weigh in.
Bill Committee also, yes,
And so we'll have that come back if you don't mind.
it's fine.
We'll have that, because I think with people not seeing that in advance, I'm thinking through it.
I don't have additional.
Oh my gosh.
Again, I don't think we're near the end,
I
and
know
others
that.
do, but I don't.
Go
So,
ahead, Representative.
I'd like to talk about coordination of benefits. If you're a current employee and you have a spouse, they potentially are covered, but it depends if they are covered with health benefits. And they must annually attest if they're not covered by something that would disqualify them for spousal benefits for their spouse, the state employee. To my understanding, and I'd love to be for this to be clarified, I don't know for a retiree if we require that the retiree themselves attest as to whether they are otherwise eligible for health benefits. And therefore, the state could bypass being responsible during those, again, at least, let's say, pre-65 years. So in the case of a state police officer who retires as required by the state and has 15 years ahead of them before they're qualified for Medicare, likely they may get another job. That other job may offer health benefits. So my first question is, does the state require that retiree attest that they don't have health benefits, or if they do, is the state still on the hook to pay that retiree health benefits?
So our coordination of benefits policy is applicable to state employees and pre-65 retirees. In addition, Medicare retirees also need to abide by it. However, because Medicare pays first for the supplement plan, we cannot sanction Medicare benefits. So as it relates to Medicare retirees, the policy just determines eligibility for Medicare retiree spouses on whether they're eligible for our plan or not, based on any other coverage that they have. But for active state employees and pre-65 retirees, it determines eligibility and also whether that coverage is primary or the coverage under our plan is primary or secondary.
Okay, so to put it in terms that I'm thinking of, as a current employee, my spouse has to go through that hurdle.
Correct.
Once I retire, both I and my spouse separately need to go through those hurdles.
No,
If we're pre-65.
No, because as a pre-65 state of Delaware retiree, you're still eligible for coverage, but your spouse would be, the spouse's coverage would be pursuant to the spousal coordination of benefits policy.
So I'm suggesting that we should consider making me as a pre-65 full retiree in the state of Delaware have to go through the same coordination of benefits, so that if I'm working and eligible for benefits from my other employer, the state shouldn't have to pay $15,000 a year for me. Am I missing something?
We do.
Dave?
Yeah, just to follow up on that. So I'm retired. I work for ABC Company. I've said, I will not take your health insurance if you pay me a higher salary. So we agreed upon, because I got benefits from the state. why would I give that up as a retiree? I mean, I've earned it, I've worked 30 years, I should just have my benefits. I think we get to the problem by saying, if you're under 65, you're paying a higher premium than you did while you were an active employee. That would then kind of force them, okay, I need to look at my new company versus now my higher premium as a pre-65 retiree. And then they can decide what to do. I don't think if we do coordination of benefits, it's just gonna be a huge headache.
And that might be something then for a future meeting and.
Yeah,
Go ahead, go ahead, Representative.
Paul, I'd asked the question, I think at a subcommittee level, maybe a couple of years ago, and was told that it would be an administrative nightmare to try to coordinate benefits for pre-65 in terms of coordinate those benefits. I mean, I'm drawing on my memory bank at this point, but I believe we had that discussion. And even with spousal benefits, and correct me, Leanne, if I'm wrong, the coordination of spousal benefits, there were rules changes, and I thought that in order not to receive the state benefit, the spouse to receive the state benefit, the benefits they had available had to be equal to or better than what the state was offering. Is that correct?
From a cost perspective, yeah.
Okay.
It looks at the premiums for the health insurance available to them from their employer or employer. Thank you.
So, and Mr. Craig, as far as, you know, as a retiree, can I say to ABC, hey, don't give me the health benefit, give me more money? Well, frankly, a current employee's spouse can do the same thing, right? Current employee's spouse can say, hey, I'm covered because of my state employee's spouse. So so ABC, please hire me, and
I'm not sure what the coordination benefit.
No.
No, that wouldn't work because the current policy talks about the health insurance offered by the spouse's employer. So in that case, if it's offered, then we look at the cost of that, whether or not they, and because it's offered, it's pursuant to our
so
policy.
wouldn't that catch the situation that Mr. Craig presented before?
That it's a retiree does not have that coordination.
That's what I'm saying, shouldn't we?
Well, this would be a consideration, I think, in a
We're
future
looking for
conversation,
savings.
because we really, for now, we want to get to the reports.
Why do we need to get to the report when there's work to do? I don't
There
get,
is
I
still-
don't get this.
There
The
is
report
work.
is our work is unfinished. Why are we trying to put stuff into a report when we
Why
still
want
are
to get things
doing
so
work?
that we have more opportunity? I mean, we're not saying no, I mean,
Well,
come back with
why
that,
don't
it's
you-
just
why don't
something we
you
don't
make a
have
motion?
details.
We'll table it and think, I mean, we'll think about it. I think your idea is a good one.
Right, we don't disagree with
So-
your ideas.
If you have a motion now on that, or.
I would like at the next meeting, the
Bring
agenda
it
to
in.
have the item of coordination of benefits for pre-65 retirees.
Yeah. And I think having those, like, for people in advance, so they've had a chance to look at it and to read it, so I'm not. I got you.
What is the audience of an October report?
Right, well, at the end.
It's a
I-
non-final report, so there's more happening. What is an October report?
Well, no, we're
providing?
trying to
Can I
get some things
interject a
down.
minute though, in this conversation, just from our experience, I think what you're hearing, and I hear what you're suggesting, I agree with, but I think you're missing the point on this one. So if my wife goes to an employer and let's say they have an option to have benefits or not, and she says no, because I want to make more money, the state of Delaware doesn't care if she said yes or no. If that company has the ability to give her benefits, tag, she's it. So whether we did what you wanted in that case, I think was what we're agreeing with, it wouldn't matter. But I do understand what you're saying in like the employers or in the retirees case. So
yeah,
That's a good point.
so one of them, I don't think it helps at all. The other one, I think it clearly
Right.
does. So that's.
Yep.
And I think if you.
Am I
bring
saying that
back-
right? Yeah.
Correct. And I think if you bring it back, like you said, we're not gonna fly away magically, I understand. I just had promised the staff who are diligently just wanting to have a few edits when they leave today, so they have some things, but these are important content.
Your point is, don't use the state's money to leverage as an employer, more money from another guy and make the state carry the tab on your benefits when you could have got it from that employer.
Yes.
You're almost suggesting to treat retirees the same way that we treat the retiree spouse.
The employee spouse.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
yeah,
Mhm.
the employee spouse, correct. I'm sorry.
But these are good things to look at for future hires. So if you have it written out, and if you have it, I think it'll be very
Yeah,
quick to
that's cool.
discuss. Very quick to discuss. Okay, with that, if you'd like, I don't know if we start with the school teacher, the approach, everybody looks like they need to do jumping jacks. Before we move on. You know.
We're gonna get to remaining meetings.
Um,
Item 6.
We should, why don't we do a little bit of a report and say
Okay.
that at the very end for you? How's that? All right. All right, so we had started a little bit, and again, I'm sorry to seem anxious, it's just I know we have a limited number of hours of time and help that are trying to hear from people, make some editorial changes. This may be very quick, so we may have plenty more time to talk. So we can make it fast for this report, let's do it. So Wayne, I know you had pulled some stuff
Madam
up.
Chair,
Yes, go ahead, we'll start with the school teacher.
I seek this group's approval on inserting, I'm sorry, in replacing paragraph 3 in the introductory letter,
Mhm.
replacing that paragraph with 2 paragraphs that were supplied by the esteemed Secretary of Finance, Mr. Geissenberger.
Now I know it's.
How'd I
getting
do,
late
Rick?
today. Rick, did you hear that? Oh my God, you didn't. Rick, you
I-
missed it.
No, I was recording it on my personal. phone.
Oh, no.
That's gonna be my new voicemail message.
Okay, so is everybody following along?
And I'd look for that in with consensus. rather
So if you
than a
follow,
voice
if you're pulling up report feedback, right? And then you take it and you compare it over to the report memo, you would be inserting in place of this one paragraph here. You would literally, such the professor, you would literally be scratching through and putting in the other 2 paragraphs. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. If what I would like to recommend is as we make changes, if I can get a quick aye and then we'll just move on. Everyone in favor of those changes, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed, no abstentions. All right, next.
Madam Chairman, I would propose that on page 1, there were 3 individuals who wish to remove in the first sentence where it reads, over the past several years, the SEBC and the RBSC held many, remove the word public.
Where is it? Oh, yeah,
Top line.
First paragraph, top line of page 1.
Just held many meetings instead.
Just held many meetings, remove the word public.
is that because of the SEBC or because I think
Yes.
we've held a lot of public?
Yes,
But we're not.
Well, yes,
mentioning
you
that.
see some public.
we're
Yeah,
not,
they're
yeah.
public too.
Well, the issue here is that the whole court case was based upon a notion that apparently was not done
Alright.
to the level that was expected by the court. And so there's a
Okay.
concern with the word public
Okay.
there. So I'm asking.
So we have a motion to eliminate the word public, all in favor, say
And
aye.
but actually, before we do that, I believe that there are counter things that have from Secretary DeMatteis that ought
Oh,
to
where
be,
is that? Do we have
ought
one?
to be read into the record to discuss this.
And
That was the very beginning.
On page 1.
Page 1,
Why
on
did
page
I-
6 and
oh,
7, we
oh.
have to make it clear that.
Oh, okay,
No,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, it was a separate
She
thing.
submitted a separate document
Oh, do we have it?
yesterday.
We don't have it in front of us.
Now it's printed.
Do we have it?
We do.
It was
Okay,
emailed.
Rick, do you have it, Secretary Geisenberger?
We have it.
Oh, wait, here it is.
Are you talking about, are we speaking of this,
I don't know.
Kristen?
This is
Are we
here.
speaking about this here?
I'm gonna ask Kristen whether she provided it.
Hang on.
It's in the big packet, about 4 pages in
Yeah,
there.
it's second, it's the second to last page.
Yeah, DHR
Right here,
response.
number 8.
Yeah.
There it is, so we have it then. So y'all, it's under the table of contents, public comment. Secretary DeMatteis was placed in the public comment section, I guess, right? Is that it? You have
It was a
it?
response to a public comment,
So it's
sent in
responding to
from,
Senator Peters.
yes.
Senator Peterson.
I would suggest that taking the word public out, which is a hot button term, and just leaving meetings is to me innocuous and avoids language that some take as inflammatory, and therefore it's the easier of two paths. So I would support
So we have
the suggestion of removing the word public and just saying they held many meetings.
many meetings.
We're not saying they're not public, we're not saying they're public, we're just saying they held meetings. Of that, we can all agree, that's how I view it.
And Paul, I would agree. I think the record of those bodies itself will stand for whether they were or were not public.
Right.
I think for our report, just meetings suffices.
You shouldn't weigh in.
For our meetings. for us.
As long as this conversation is recorded in the minutes, I will support that.
Okay. So we're just saying meetings, it doesn't reflect public or non-public. So with that, I will call again, everyone in favor of, for now, just saying meetings, without the word public. All in favor, say aye, please. Aye. Any abstentions or nays? Nays? Anyone? Okay, if not, move it along. Go ahead, Wayne.
The next edit is in the same paragraph, the last line. OPEB trust fund is woefully underfunded and unsustainable. Remove the word woefully.
I would support that for the same reason. I think taking opinion out, and let the reader attach what they wish for adjectives, or adverbs in this case, it just makes sense.
So it's,
So it just is underfunded and unsustainable.
okay, is it,
We're woefully out.
oh, woefully, okay, yeah. Changing that, all right. Get out here. So OPEB trust fund is,
So
Underfunded and unsustainable.
we're keeping the word unsustainable, which is
Yes.
probably,
yes,
which is probably the more important word there.
is,
Yeah.
right, right, because whether it's woefully or significantly, whatever you want to
That's
use.
ours, people are.
Okay, OPEB trust fund is underfunded and unsustainable. You know what, to make it move quicker, is it okay? I guess as a chair, we set the rules of Roberts.
do.
If you are okay with this, we'll announce what we're changing, and then if there is no one opposed or abstaining from that, we're gonna keep going. Does that make sense to everyone? Did you hear me online? And Senator Townsend, if you're okay, because you're co-chair, you're all right with that? So,
Yep,
yeah, we're
okay with
gonna,
that.
you're good with that? Okay, then make us go faster. Okay. So next week.
Next change is in the next paragraph, the fourth line down. Again, remove the word public after several public meetings, remove the word public after several meetings in early 2022, the SEBC ...
So public, again, meaning that we're not taking a position,
Right.
public, non-public,
Just
but just
this.
meeting.
Right.
Okay. Pause,
In,
hearing no one, go ahead.
in that same paragraph, one person wanted to remove the entire last sentence. Another person wanted to remove the phrase included language that recategorized the state plan to Medicare Advantage and. So the sentence would read, the budget included one-time supplemental funding for the OPEB trust fund equal to 1% of the prior year's budget.
As a legislator, I sort of feel like the statement, it's a factual statement to say that the budget bill included language. We characterized it.
Actually, I looked through the budget and all I found was there was section 116 of the epilogue.
Yes.
Which changed the
Description of.
no, it was for double state share. Just all it did was change the eligibility for double state share.
There's another section.
No, there isn't.
That's the only section. that
Oh,
I was-
We're talking not this year, last year.
FY 23. I looked.
Which I think
I
only
don't have,
impacted
I don't have
which only
search
impacted
on
about
my
600
thing, so I had to read through it. I never saw Medicare Advantage anywhere
Can we
else.
come back to that, Wayne? Is that all
Sure,
right? Well,
sure.
let me see what I can find.
And again,
Yeah, and
Wayne,
I
are these,
agree. I wanted to
are
be
these
factual.
edits for you? I mean, again, it's good to include things that we feel are significant from the public, important,
I pulled in.
The
my
ones that
own
you
and
felt
others as well,
that you thought, okay,
so. And
Because
try
again,
to
we
make
can't always
it
get
one
everything.
continuous thing.
okay.
Next change is in the next paragraph, paragraph 3. What I suggested was to insert, let me find the insert in a second. Secretary Geisenberger suggested removing the last sentence that reads, "The subcommittee first convened March 6, 2023." And he added, "The governor disbanded the RBSC by Executive Order 56 on February 11, 2023. The new subcommittee first convened March 6, 2023. So it actually is inserting a sentence.
And it's really just adding the information about the disbanding
Yes.
of the RBSC.
Right.
Seems reasonable.
Just a point of order. We've already approved the abbreviated report that's going to the SEBC on Monday, correct?
Yes.
And now we're wordsmithing the next report that will go to the General Assembly and the SEBC. I mean, I'm not,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I think there are a couple other issues perhaps we ought to get to.
Yeah.
In terms of new initiatives.
Okay, at some point, okay.
Yeah, at some point, and again,
We'll make sure,
I understand there are a lot of loose ends out there.
right,
But I just wonder why we're going through this process today when we could come back in a week or two and, you know, deal with dotting the i's and crossing the t's, that's all.
yeah, and I think what we can do is proceed into a little bit here, and if you have another motion, we can certainly get to that. This room, I do know, and the staff have to meet at 4:30 today. Like, so there is a hard stop, so we delineated the 3-hour window.
I mean, I'm certainly not trying to disrupt the
No,
process.
no, but I do understand you have a resolution, so what we should probably do is let's go and do what we can.
I mean, we had an immediate
Yeah,
situation to deal with because the SEBC is meeting on Monday. And we resolved that issue. And there may be another issue that we want to refer to the SEBC for that Monday meeting, perhaps not.
right. Got it.
And believe me, Wayne, I don't mean any slight to you.
Right.
These
I
are all important issues.
Well, and Senator Penny John just alerted me that he has to end at a certain time. So what I would suggest that we do is why don't we move up a little, maybe another 10 or so minutes on this, then come to the resolution, or?
So,
Is
I'm
that all
sorry,
right?
another 10 minutes here and
Yeah.
then.
And move back, and then we'll see how long that conversation takes, because I know you've got another meeting. All right, so we'll do a few more of these, keep going.
The next change is on the bottom of page 2. And the issue is the last sentence refers to the Rise Delaware group. And it turns out that group was, that presentation was made by 4 folks, but they weren't, it wasn't done by Rise. I looked over the materials. And so I'm proposing that the last sentence be deleted. That starts, the subcommittee also offered an opportunity. That whole sentence would come out and the following paragraph would come in. The subcommittee also provided an opportunity for a retiree to conduct a 30-minute presentation during the March 22-23 meeting based on the work of 4 retirees. The presentation included basic factual background, analysis of monthly data, and suggestions for the subcommittee's future meetings. They identified several data discrepancies, including inaccuracies in the reported retiree contributions and healthcare costs. I got that paragraph by reading through their materials and carefully looking at factual things.
And Wayne, correct me if I'm wrong, but we had an actual document that they presented.
Yes.
So is your thought that if we put this in, that will be part of the appendix?
No, I mean, no, this is just, this paragraph would replace that sentence.
Are you also asking that
Well,
we're gonna,
their
there's gotta be a-
document is part of the public comment.
so can we at least reference where the public could find that
Yes.
document?
Yes.
Well, the whole, I mean, yes,
Because that's what we're doing with other
Right.
items, like,
Yeah.
to be consistent, I think if things were referenced where people could find it.
Mhm.
And I know for the audience here, it's probably like watching paint dry. We appreciate your attention. We
It's
do.
colorful paint.
Colorful paint, okay, colorful paint. We're gonna just like a few more minutes and then we'll get into the others, but, so Kristen, we would have like reports in the supplement. Okay, continuing,
okay,
and
next,
then we'll give Wayne a break maybe in the next round, let somebody else read some changes, all right, go ahead.
the next paragraph, starting with the subcommittee found that public comments, . And I would replace that with the following rather long paragraph, but I think it's important because we did hear a very large amount of public comment that I think all feel was very valuable. And I think it needs to be amplified somewhat in our report. So I would propose the following paragraph. The subcommittee heard public comments during meetings generally focused on A, financing to continue the existing Medicare supplement benefit, and B, strong dissatisfaction with Medicare Advantage. The following concerns were frequently expressed. The process the state utilized in selecting Medicare Advantage, the 2,300 prior authorizations required by Medicare Advantage, the provider network limitations of Medicare Advantage, the possibility of co-pays, deductible, cost sharing, and co-insurance fees included in Medicare Advantage not charged under special medic bill. The loss of access to major healthcare institutions such as Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, University of Pennsylvania, Sloan Kettering, which do not accept Medicare Advantage, that an insurance company would be involved in healthcare decisions rather than solely retirees' doctors. And last, their belief that Medicare Advantage plans have their profits or make their profits by delaying and denying necessary medical care to participants. In approximately 10 hours of public comment, no retiree or current state employee spoke in favor of Medicare Advantage.
I'm gonna throw out, I work really hard to be even-handed. I prefer that without the word necessary, because that's a judgment as to whether the Medicare medical service is necessary. I think the intention here is the patient and the doctor consider it necessary, the insurance company does not. So again, it's in the eye of the beholder. So I prefer to take that adjective out.
Sure.
Can you read that clause?
Yeah, so it would be their belief that Medicare Advantage plans make their profit by delaying and denying medical care to participants.
I would prefer it in that format.
Yeah, okay.
People's thoughts.
You're right.
Comments,
So we remove the word necessary. You have that, Kristen?
thoughts, everyone okay, any objections?
So, yeah, my concern with this is that some of this stuff applies to some Medicare Advantage plans, but not necessarily the plan that was proposed by the state. I'm looking particularly at the fourth bullet, the possibility of co-pays, deductibles, cost sharing, co-insurance fees included in Medicare Advantage. Well, maybe you want to say some Medicare Advantage plans, but certainly not the plan that was proposed by the state. I think the same is true with this loss of access. I think that may not accept, not that do not accept. I think it's a stretch to argue that none of these programs accept any Medicare Advantage plan. So I don't want to deny what people said, but this is what a lot of people said, but some of it simply isn't accurate. So I don't know if we could say included in some Medicare Advantage plans as a way to try to assuage that. But
Wait,
I
let's see.
I don't want this to come across to a reader as as being factual.
Well, let's, which line, what are we number? Start with.
Can you read that bullet again, Wayne? Is that all right?
Yeah. I think you meant this bullet, Mr. Secretary.
Correct.
The possibility of co-pays, deductibles, cost sharing, and co-insurance fees included in Medicare Advantage, not charged under special medic bill. Is that the one that you were speaking of, Mr. Secretary?
Yeah, I mean, just overall, we heard a lot of comments about Medicare Advantage writ large
Mhm.
from plans that are very, very rich in benefits to plans that are less rich in benefits. But the question in my mind is, I wouldn't want a reader to read this and say, I mean, there were no co-pays, deductibles, cost sharing, or co-insurance fees, and what the state proposed with Medicare Advantage. There just wasn't.
Well, we're not saying that. We're simply, all I'm trying to do here is report on the concerns that I frequently heard. And this committee frequently heard. Whether they were right or wrong isn't the issue here. It's what we heard.
Just as a point of clarity, Madam Chair, it's clear in the paragraph above, all that is being suggested in this is why we're here. It's not saying all these accurate statements were made and therefore we are here. I mean, I was at the first meeting, you know, every single thing that's on here was mentioned. It's not saying it's accurate. It's not saying it's not accurate. It's saying the reasons why the community got so concerned was because these were their beliefs. And it says very clearly, the following concerns were frequently expressed. They were expressed. It's not saying they were accurate or not accurate. It's saying they were expressed, which is why maybe many people lost trust in certain things and why we're here today. I think this is perfectly within the parameters of what was done and why we're here in the first place.
Would you be comfortable with adding the word, the following concerns and beliefs were frequently expressed? Because so many of these are beliefs and not accurate as it relates to the plan that the state.
How about Secretary, if we just use the word, the following statements were frequently expressed. They were statements and you could say if the statement was a concern or not, or was accurate or not. These were the statements that people were making that caused us to get to this point.
I'm fine with that. As long as, again, this conversation is included in the minutes.
So all in favor, no objections to that with the word.
Mr. Secretary, what are your thoughts on the word concerns? I mean, again, I can be concerned that I would die if I put a parachute on my back and jump out of a plane, and I'm not gonna do it. It doesn't mean that's factual, but that's what I'm concerned with, and that's why I don't jump out of planes with parachutes. I think it's factual to say, I've just expressed a concern about the unsafety of whatever that's called, parachuting out of airplanes. I don't think, skydiving, there, I knew there's a better word. So I think concerns is fine. Again, this report is not weighing in on accuracy or not of the concerns that we have heard, frankly unanimously in public comment during our meetings. So I would suggest that just the word concerns be used there. And I think perhaps where it says in Medicare Advantage, it could be by, which line it is? Okay.
No, I'm sorry, one about
that's right. Included, which can be included in Medicare Advantage. Is that
Say
two
concerns of the
possibility
concern
of
of the.
which can be included in Medicare Advantage plans?
Correct.
Does that sound acceptable? As a concern that was raised, as concerns that were raised.
Look, as long as the minutes reflect that these are not, that the committee is not voting on the accuracy of these concerns or statements, as long as the minutes reflect that, I'm fine with the language as is.
So no other absentees or concerns, no more news. All right, moving on, let's do a couple more, and then I really want to get to the other resolution and public comment.
I'll stop when you tell me.
All right, roll on.
Okay, at the top of the next page, page 4, the first sentence. Would like to expand that to remove that sentence and replace it with 3 retirees also provided the subcommittee with an analysis of Medicare options by state. Their effort clarified and corrected previously reviewed information and included a summary of key findings.
Anyone? Okay, all right. Hearing.
Actually, I have the same comment around corrected. Corrected implies I mean, I'd have to look at those reports to see whether I agree that the corrected things. I mean, if we want to say their effort clarified,
Well, Mr. Secretary, I went back and looked at the two meetings, one after another, and very honestly, there was a correction made, and the materials was provided by the consultant, and they came back at the next meeting and had corrections, and the corrections actually ended up mirroring the materials provided by the three folks who provided the information. So I think this is factually accurate.
Once again, trying to address that concern, would you all be okay with the word, their efforts clarified and modified previously reviewed information and included a summary of key findings, because they basically did modify it.
Yeah.
And that
Modify.
takes the
Takes
harshness
the
of
sting
maybe
out, I
the
think
correction
you're right.
word out of there. Is that better?
I think it's fine.
it's fine because it doesn't require me to go back and actually review whether it actually corrected.
All right,
Okay.
all right. Continue a couple more.
Okay. Next one is, let's see, in the next paragraph under task 3. I removed the last sentence. The cost of the state operating budget is approximately $7 million per month. I don't know that that is really necessary to be in there, and very honestly, I didn't quite understand it. And so I would suggest.
And agree with you. It's probably high, the word higher is probably missing.
Mhm,
$7 million a month higher
mhm.
compared to the governor's recommended budget.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's it. So just
And
insert
that's
the word
the
higher.
delta between the proposed advantage
and
and the
higher.
continuation and extension of medical bill
Okay,
And no objections, tough, since that was fast.
so insert the word higher
after months.
So it'll read the cost of the state operating budget is approximately $7 million per month higher compared to the.
Yes,
Okay. Yeah, that Christian, so the sentence stays in. Okay.
actually higher than would be better than compared to.
Okay. Higher than the.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. go ahead, Joe.
Okay, next one is in the next paragraph under task 4. I'm suggesting that, let me find it here. Inside the parentheses where it says, in addition to the monthly premium paid to Medicare, I'd like to clarify that. So it would read, in addition to approximately $78 million in monthly premiums paid to Medicare.
So how do you know that number?
You take the number of Medicare retirees, it's about 29,000, you multiply it by 164.90 a month times 12.
So some Medicare premiums are based on their income.
they are.
Yeah, some of them are higher, but it's at least 58 million.
So it would be at least that.
Yeah. That's why I said approximately.
All right. Well, you know what I'm thinking? Let's go, because I know that Representative Overly has a meeting he has to get to in the Tatnall building. And I know he had some comments. If it's okay with everyone, what we'll do is we'll switch to, I think I called it Overly, but it's Representative Bombach. Team reference, right? Everybody here. We have a resolution. So let's put our papers aside. I'm sorry, Kristen.
All right.
I'm so sorry.
Make progress.
And then I have a couple of thoughts that perhaps there might be some things we can do between now and our next meeting. We're not done after this resolution. We're gonna stay a little more and then have a little public comment. But there might be a couple of things processes wise that might help Kristen. Okay, Representative Bombach.
So you should have a 1-page handout, subject motion for Retiree Health Benefits Advisory Subcommittee dated today. Kind of dense stuff, and it has to do with, I'm going to call it a task force. We are in an advisory subcommittee, and this is calling for an advisory subcommittee. And this is done really in partnership with Representative Overly and Mr. Tashner. And what this notes is that we are one of the top, I think, top 11 most expensive states in the country for the cost of healthcare. And this affects our retirees, it affects our employees, and it affects our state. And while, you know, we are rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, if we're not also addressing the cost of healthcare in our state. So this calls for, I'm gonna say yet another, but hopefully this one will be the one that works, effort to study that deeply and to strive our best to bring healthcare pricing in Delaware in line with our other states throughout the country, rather than to be at the most expensive end. It is, most of you, I think, first received it a day ago, so I'm fine maybe having a brief discussion and then tabling it and bring it back at the next meeting. But maybe if we go to Mr. Overly.
Yeah, you can get a Representative Overly. I know this is something for years, we've talked about 20 years, right?
Yeah, well,
Go ahead.
both Jeff and I have been involved in the issue for over 20 years. It became readily apparent that healthcare pricing in Delaware is significantly higher than it is in our contiguous states and also national. You know, we constantly hear about PAYGO. If you want to have bang for your buck on the PAYGO issue, then you need to deal with pricing, and there are reasonable ways to do that. Other states have taken innovative approaches. They're referenced in this resolution. I think you know, that can be wrapped into the study of what other best practices are being employed, and it lays out a groundwork, suggests things to look at, but not limited to. You know, this has been a personal, I guess, a personal issue for me for a very long time. There are enough facts out there by very, very reasonable, recognized, and admired groups, including RAND, including Johns Hopkins, including even Willis Towers Watson data, to suggest that we have a very serious problem in terms of pricing in the state of Delaware. You know, I certainly recognize that we need to keep a healthy provider community, but at what cost? Johns Hopkins would suggest that it could be at significantly lower cost in terms of pricing and still maintain a healthy healthcare delivery system. I believe that. So Representative Geisberger, I know you have a serious interest in trying to control PAYGO. Here's your huckleberry, and I think this mechanism is long overdue, and I look forward to an independent, thorough study of the current conditions within the state of Delaware and how best to control those prices moving forward.
Okay, so with that,
I'm
the
sorry,
one thing you
one-
need to change is not
Thank
under
you.
SEBC.
There you go. So under now therefore be it resolved, that first line that my plan is to, where it currently says SEBC, to change that to the Healthcare Commission as being the appropriate body under which this would operate. All right.
Do you have a copy of this? When was it sent to us and by who?
I thought it was sent in advance. That
Yeah,
was
I
my
sent it
request
in.
yesterday.
And I know that,
Whose name was it sent under?
We will send it shortly. They're
Thank you.
looking for it now.
Sorry. That was good. All right.
You know, my first choice would have been to extend this committee to take a look at it because of the synergy
Yeah.
that exists within this committee, and I think.
And that might very well be the determinations of Senator Townsend and Rep. Bombach, you know?
Yeah, this really goes to the legislature to come up with
Correct.
legislation to do this. It could be their pleasure is to modify it.
And it may not have to be the
Yes.
healthcare commission, it could be here.
I'm gonna borrow a comment from my good
Or
friend.
maybe you don't put the designation, the legislature shall designate, you know, or you don't even have to create a task
I
force.
think a
and then
lot of
vote
this is
them.
gonna fall under Representative Bombach's lap moving forward, but, you know, Jeff has constantly used the term that when you talk about eligibility and benefits, you're talking nickels and dimes. When you talk about pricing, you're talking
pricing.
about 50s and
50s and
100s,
hundreds.
50s and 100s. That's how much money is out there on the table. And again, this is not designed to negatively impact the healthcare providers. It's about resetting the field in terms of price.
And Representative Oberle, I do want to point out that there's 4 legislative laps here that on this committee, including Representative Ramon,
Yes.
Senator Petty Johnson, Senator Townsend, and myself. So, and frankly, this is a big lift and it requires an awful lot of hands.
Absolutely.
Yep. All of them.
There's a ton of evidence, and it goes back to the
Right.
joint task force in 2015. Like Billy said, Hopkins has been in there a couple of times. Rand, we've had so many times
Multiple.
people have
Right.
been pretty open that we've got a situation
We
in
have been
Delaware
open.
where there's no competition. Because there's no competition, our pricing is way out of line with where it is in comparable markets.
And if I may.
Yes, you
And certainly, to make clear, it's not, this hasn't been attempted before, there've been a lot of efforts. There's certainly, to change the status quo, there's always opposition. In Delaware, there's been very strong opposition. But at some point, it needs to be done, it needs to be done, so.
And I'm sure there will continue to be strong opposition, but this is way past its time.
It is certainly consistent with this committee's charge in terms of sustainability of healthcare. I mean, it's right in line with our charge, so.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would just recommend that you take a look at Maryland. Maryland put in a fee schedule years ago, and it did precisely what it was supposed to do. That's why we send people for the Centers of Excellence to the state of Maryland, pay for them to stay in a hotel, pay for their family to go with them so they can have a service in another state that's significantly less expensive, so.
Yeah, we've included Maryland as one of the states that draw upon for best practices.
We know it would work in Delaware because it worked with the workers' compensation schedule.
I know, I was part of that process, and I've had that discussion with Representative Paul.
Fun. All right, so we'll have that. We're gonna have a full slate. Unless folks want to move on it now.
I think we're fine waiting until the next meeting and give people
Alright.
time, and we'll have updated the one body under which this would work, and we'll get it out to subcommittee members and the public well in advance.
So let's have a few more fun of edits. Right, and then on public comments, we're here till 4:30, y'all. I know that's torture. You're here. It is. I'm reading her lips. I did not call you torture, y'all. I did
That's
not.
an
I know, supposed to end at 4.
Oh, at 4. Well, guess what then? All right, the class wants to end. The professor is staying here. How about that? All right.
I did just get the document, and just for everyone that's logged in version.
How many people do we have signed up for comment? 3. Okay, so let's do a little bit more and then we'll do our comments. Let's do that, please.
Okay, I guess it's back to me, is that right?
Yes,
Madam Chair?
for
Yeah,
now.
we'll
And if
take
you all
care of
have thoughts, I mean, there are other ways to do processes with documents, but since this has been one that has had lots of feedback, we'll continue this path. I think between now and our next meeting, which again, we do want to save time at the end to discuss that, we'll have to do a doodle poll. If we come up with something that is more expeditious, I have done reports in the past where it was more easy to send out and get feedback, but since we've had so much, that's why we're going line by line.
Is it worth asking the broad shoulders of Mr. Emsley to do an attempt of his remaining points
Right.
with a side, bullet or whatever of why where this came from, why he chose this at the next meeting,
At the
and
next meeting.
that way we're all prepared. We know what he's gonna be talking about. We know if we have any questions, which
Okay.
ones to question it. We may be able to get through it faster that way.
Yeah.
How does that sound to you?
If we have how many and what he has, right?
Are you near the end or is there quite a bit more?
I have actually, I think 3 more.
Oh, 3 more, let's go.
I think it's
Let's
just
go.
3. Don't hold me to it, but I think it's 3.
Right.
Okay, on page,
And let me ask one question because of the public comment. All right, can we stay in this room until 4:30? We have to leave it.
Yeah.
Do public comment and finish with, that's fine, 3 points, is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah, let's
Do it
just,
the other way around.
in honor of the public, let's go to the public then now. I just thought of that. I thought we had till 4:30 anyway. Okay,
So we have Mary Graham.
Where would you like me to go?
right here is perfect.
Right standing here, okay.
Yeah.
Say something
Here's
good enough.
good,
Yeah.
because as a speaker.
Oh, they can hear
That's a-
there.
Mary, that's
They
a
can hear you.
microphone right there.
Okay, I'll talk to that. Talk to the heavens.
They're pretty sensitive.
So I had one comment I was gonna make, but you know, I get steamed when I hear somebody representing something to you all, and you think you have a right to take it, which I agree you would, but you know, I thought today, should I bring my computer? I don't usually bring it with me because I have plenty of trouble reading it, but I brought it today. So guess what I have on my computer? All 220 pages of the Medicare Advantage contract. Now, Karen Peterson is going to address for you more specifics about the costs, because she spent an incredible amount of time a year ago reviewing the evidence of coverage, the medical benefits chart, and the contract to find the places where they talked all about the costs. But you know, just to give you an example, on page 76 of the 220 pages, under evidence of coverage, it says, this document explains your benefits and rights. Use this document to understand about your cost sharing. It doesn't say to, oh, well, there is no cost sharing. You've got to read all 220 pages to understand your cost sharing. Then on page 173, and these are just examples, there's a definition of important words. Cost sharing. Cost sharing refers to amounts that a member has to pay, not the zero amounts you have to pay when services are received. Cost sharing includes any combination of the following three types of payments. Any deductible amount a plan may impose, any fixed co-payment amount, any co-insurance. And all those are in there. And you know, what are they? You don't know. So you know they're there because they didn't say zero. And I challenge the secretary to show us anywhere where the state ever promised it would be zero. And indeed, there was an affidavit put in a litigation by Karen Peterson that mentioned all this. They never challenged it. So, you know, footprints in the snow. The point that I wanted to make to you all is a glaring one about the SEBC. You all have done really, really good work, but you're not done. And it's easy to think you've been through your 7 months, you've heard from all of us, and you know, you'd like to think, okay, you've done it, but they have no clue as far as I can tell. And several of us have spoken with SEBC members, and why would they? Because they haven't had the benefit of having all of us pester the heck out of them. And again, I've said this before, Lieutenant Governor, and it applies also to the co-chairs especially, that you have allowed the public to speak. And I think it has been helpful, and that has been tremendous. They don't have that. So I just want to press you. I think it's so important. We have 2 members, I believe, on the RHBAS who are also on the SEBC. And I know, you know, you might have not that easily to get there, but I hope both of you can be there on Monday and can press and explain what's going on, because I just don't think they have a clue. I also hope that our other elected officials who are not actually members can go. As you know, Representative Ramon, when you made that impassioned speech and felt you could just express yourself, that was tremendous. And people have really commented on that. And of course, I can't laud all of you for everything you've done, but please really do make sure that you show up there, because I know they are not up to speed. They don't know what's going on. So thank you. I will sit down.
Dennis Young.
Can I yield my turn to Karen Peterson?
Okay.
After her.
Karen. Thank you. My name is Karen Peterson. I just have 2 responses to things that were said here today. The first pertains to Secretary DeMatteis's response to my public comments. These are the same arguments they made in court and lost. With regard to Secretary Geisenberger's claim that there are no costs associated with Medicare Delaware's custom Medicare Advantage plan. Apparently, he's never read the 38-page medical benefits chart that came with that plan, Delaware's plan, not somebody else's, Delaware's. 38 pages. Begins with out-of-pocket costs, $1,000, first entry. A deductible by any other name is still a deductible. It's $1,000 off the top. Plus, there are cost-sharing fees. They gave this convoluted explanation, but we still don't know how much the cost-sharing fees are. They're either 30% of the cost of the service or 50%. It's going to be a surprise when you get your bill. For all medical services, there's a cost-sharing fee. So how he can say there are no costs, it just blows my mind. There are costs for charges deemed not medically necessary after the fact. There are costs for out-of-network services, 38 pages of costs. And for Secretary Kaisenberger to say there aren't any costs, that is just nonsense. And it just, I feel like we're back on day one. I feel like we're back a year ago when we saw these slides saying zero copay, zero this, zero that. And then you read the medical benefits chart and there are 38 pages of charges. So I don't know, we live in different universes or something. Thank you.
Dennis Young's up.
Dennis Young, retired physician, spoken before. And I guess this comes under a category of fine print. Today's Wall Street Journal, there's a article on the opinion page. I just quote a few things from it. Government-run healthcare systems always end up rationing treatment and denying care to manage costs without exception. An example is now playing out as Medicare reduces reimbursement for a blood test that has improved the standard of care for organ transplant recipients. In March, a company program run by a contractor for our CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the company changed the wording of a billing article, which determines Medicare coverage. The company has continued to insist that there was no actual change in coverage, only a revision for clarity. CMS says that patients with Medicare can continue to access blood tests for organ transplant rejection when medically appropriate and ordered by their physicians. But doctors have read the March billing revision and understand that Medicare will no longer pay for the tests. They have ordered them less, knowing that most transplant patients can't afford to pay for them out of pocket. And a follow-up survey found that there have been a 20% drop in overall transplant patient testing volume recently, no doubt driven by the CMS cutback. So recommending for this subcommittee to recommend that a Medigap program that mirrors MedicFill should specifically forbid any plan that uses prior authorization for services. I think that would eliminate wiggle room for an insurance company to deny services medically necessary as determined by the physician. Even with that, there still exists the opportunity for insurance companies to approximate prior authorization savings by using restricted networks where only some physicians and providers are admitted to the program and only some medications are allowed. This would reject such centers of excellence such as Johns Hopkins. So continued inclusion in those networks could depend upon report cards of physicians' efficiency with controlling costs to the company. I already spoke a couple of meetings back about my having participated as an independent medical evaluator for a company, so that I would see people with disabilities who are already receiving disability payments who were now going to be denied because their company physician had found they no longer qualified for that. And the number of cases I had, most of the time I found my reports, my extensive reports, in favor of the patient continuing the disability and the company dropped. So they didn't use me. And that's one way of controlling their costs, by restricting access. So I think it's important to be specific about recommending that Medicare Advantage, any Medicare plan, Medigap plan would forbid using prior authorization, or at least disqualify that company from using prior auth.
Okay, we have a couple more hands up. Diana Noonan, online.
Hi, thank you.
Hello.
Hi. This committee and the state's retirees both deserve recognition for their dedication and their persistence in coming to an equitable and appropriate response to the issue at hand. At the beginning, we could not have been further apart in our individual understanding and goals. I want to acknowledge those members of this committee, Paul Baumbach especially, for putting in the time and work to truly come to understand the retirees' viewpoint and to acknowledge that the treatment of state retirees should be based on past commitments from the state. Your decision to grandfather those who were hired with a promise of a defined level of health care in retirement is the moral, fair, and appropriate response. This committee has put in the time and the effort to study and learn and grow through the process, as have retirees. I have not always felt that you have heard us, but in the end, I was wrong. You understand. You have heard us, but you are faced with a mandate from a governor. However, the majority of you are not blindly following only that mandate and have acknowledged the human and the moral aspects of this issue also. Your recommendations exhibit your dedication to finding an equitable answer. That is why, when at the last SEBC committee meeting, I was astonished and highly disturbed by the outburst of Secretary DeMatteis stating that there would be no grandfathering. It is no surprise that she feels this way. She and a couple of others have voted no across the board. But the severity of the harshness in her comment was an insult to every person who sat through these meetings and put in the time and the effort to make informed and thoughtful recommendations. Since the SEBC seems to be only accepting the RHBAS recommendation to take Medicare off the table at this time, I'm disappointed that we all spent so many hours and hours preparing for and attending these meetings. The Secretary also wants to disregard the recommendation to make the upcoming contract a 3-year contract and wants to change it to 2 years. We are not stupid. Highmark wants the Medicare Advantage contract to include all 130,000 state employees. Combining the two groups into one entity sets us up for Medicare Advantage contract in 2 years. This process started with suspicion and a huge lack of trust. It saddens me to realize that the distrust has returned and that the committee members who did work hard and who did want to do the right thing for retirees will be affected by that distrust. Also, I have asked in writing for a definition by the state of the term grandfathering. Please provide this at the next committee meeting, the RHBAS definition of grandfathering, as well as the Secretary DeMatteis's definition. My definition would include the fact that we worked for this benefit, we were promised this benefit, we have signed documents with the state to choose this benefit as part of our retirement package, a contract in my eyes, and we deserve the benefit of a Medigap policy equal to and one that mimics in every way the current Medicare plan. Thank you. I know I just make any friends, but that's how I feel.
Who else is left? Steve LePage. Steve?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great, thank you. I just wanted to say that as far as I agree with the comments of going back and reviewing after 5 years of the plan to see if it's progressing as it should. I don't necessarily agree that if the plan is doing better than expected after 5 years, that you somehow go back and maybe readjust it. I think you just keep it going and you let it go because you're going to reap the reward at the end anyway. So why tinker with something if it's already providing a huge benefit toward the objective or the goal. The second part is that I think there's going to have to be something done with the SEBC committee. I think that committee is going to have to be looked at and revamped. It's evident that to me that there's one person in charge, basically, and I don't think that's the way the committee should be run. And I would encourage the legislature to look at the SEBC and revamp it as necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Ms. Gregory. Could you please tell us your first name?
Hello, my name is Deldra Gregory Colvin.
Thank you.
My name is Deldra Gregory Colvin, and I am the benefits coordinator for the Colonial School District. In addition to managing the benefits for the district, I am accountable for the functionality of retirement, which includes teaching employees about retirement and administering the paperwork to help employees transition to retirement. I want the committee to understand that many of us have played the long game, which means we have waived or delayed other opportunities to secure our incomes and benefits through the current design of the benefit plan. In my case, I attained a state job while my son was younger. This employment aligned with my son's school schedule. As my son matured, I did not need to continue with the strict schedule, thus allowing me to expand my job search, which would have included more advancement and more money. At the time, I reviewed the long-term benefits of the state pension plan and decided to stay. I calculated that it would be in my best interest to secure my retirement pension and retirement benefits and complete my 20 years. I intentionally waived other opportunities that would have provided me more money and more advancement. It appears that this committee plans include threatening our plan design and plan eligibility. As I mentioned before, I'm accountable for teaching retirement. It is important to note that I often teach employees that 20 years of employment is a sweet spot. I explain how at this point benefits are most affordable. In addition, I explained that the current Medicare plan is worth its weight in gold. Employees are striving for this. Please know that employees have planned on their future based on the available information we have. Here is the bottom line. For those of a certain age, we have lived a good part of our life and we have worked most of our workable years. I simply do not have the luxury of time to reset or restart. I am happy that I plan. I've sat down with financial planners and we have projected my future and my earning needs based on the current plan and design. The last column of a lot of your handouts state that you will change the plan for those who retire as of January 25. We do not have the luxury to restructure our future in that short amount of time. Thank you for your consideration.
That wraps up the public comment, our meeting. A lot has occurred. I guess we'll have to do a doodle poll to reconvene for the next meeting. And any other comments from committee members?
When we, so when we
Co-chairs,
when we come up with the next meeting date, it will be put on the public meeting calendar. Can we also put something into the website that people now have as their favorite of some material, subcommittee materials? Does that make sense that you have to sort through the state public calendar?
Yep, so under attend meeting, you'll see just that as soon as you get to our SEBC
Perfect.
website, you'll see our next meeting date. So as soon as we get them, they'll get them
And
updated.
can it also have the time?
Yep, they have both.
Okay, great.
Great, thank you. Thank you. All right.
We don't know.
We'll
figure it out.
Yeah, what?
Motion to adjourn.
Yes, motion to adjourn. We're running. All right, thank you.
Now I'm gonna.